Welcome to This Explainer, where we're going to dive into exactly why so many wildly successful early-stage businesses hit an absolute brick wall the second they try to grow. Think about that thrilling journey when a business first takes off. You've got the late nights, the rush of those first big sales, the high of building something entirely from scratch. But scaling that initial success, man, that is a completely different beast, and it regularly traps some incredibly smart people.
And I've got a number that might actually shock you. McKinsey research shows that 78% of companies that have already found product-market fit still fail to scale up successfully. 78%. Let that sink in for a second. These are companies that have a product people genuinely want, they have real momentum in the market, yet nearly 8 out of 10 will eventually just stall out, get acquired for pennies on the dollar, or completely collapse. In the real world, this usually looks like rampant employee burnout, totally chaotic operations, and totally missing the mark on customer deliveries.
So this brings us to a pretty mind-boggling question. If the product is phenomenal and the demand is obviously there, why does the business still die? Well, looking at the research, a very clear, consistent theme emerges. And honestly, we're going to treat these as the central villains of our story today. It almost always comes down to missing structure, a fundamental lack of strategy, and a complete absence of clarity across the organization.
Today in This Explainer, we'll map out the anatomy of this failure across 5 critical stages. 1. The complexity cliff. 2. The premature scaling trap. 3. The founder bottleneck. 4. The infrastructure deficit. And finally, 5. Building systems for scale.
All right, let's jump right into stage 1, the complexity cliff.
Look, we've got to get this distinction straight right out of the gate. Growth versus scaling. They are not the same thing. Growth is just throwing more resources at a problem to get a linear, one-to-one increase in revenue. Like you hire 10 new salespeople to get 10 times the sales. Pretty straightforward. Scaling, on the other hand, is achieving exponential output with only marginal input. A great example? Implementing a self-serve software platform where 1,000 new customers can sign up overnight and you don't have to hire a single new person to process them.
McKinsey's 10 Rules of Growth hits the nail right on the head here. They say, what got you here won't get you there. All that scrappy hustle, the informal communication, the off-the-cuff mindsets that got you your first 10 million, they become the exact liabilities preventing you from scaling any further. When you're a small team, sure, you can just yell across the room to fix a problem. But at scale, without rigid, deliberate structure, that hustle just turns into absolute chaos. You simply can't rely on sheer willpower anymore.
And that chaotic hustle leads us straight into trap number 2, the premature scaling trap.
So Startup Genome defines premature scaling as accelerating dimensions like your customer base, your product features, or your team size way faster than actual customer validation justifies. In plain English, it means acting like the big kid on the block before you've actually earned the right to be there. It's hiring massive teams or dumping millions into marketing before you even know if your core business model makes money. It's stepping on the gas before you actually have a strategy in place.
This data perfectly illustrates what we call the leaky bucket problem. Imagine pouring water, which is your hard-earned cash, into a bucket full of holes, which are your unproven products or totally oversized teams. Growing your team or product too fast without clarity just accelerates your insolvency. In fact, the data shows these businesses are 2.3 times more likely to overspend on customer acquisition, and their teams are often 3 times larger than they realistically should be for their stage. It's a massive, glaring, structural failure.
If you want to see a real-world, totally painful example of this, look no further than Webvan from the early .com days. They were this huge pioneer in online grocery delivery. They had this massive world-changing vision, but they completely skipped the discovery and strategy phase. They went straight into hyper-expansion mode without taking a single second to structurally validate their unit economics.
And the scale of this disaster is just wild. Webvan burned through $1.2 billion, literally a billion with a B, building 26 automated warehouses before they even tested if people wanted to buy groceries online in a single local market. $1.2 billion, all before validating their core premise. It is a brutal reminder that an aggressive speed kills mentality when you expand with absolute clarity and a concrete strategy is basically just financial suicide.
Which leads us to a really uncomfortable truth for a lot of entrepreneurs. Number 3. The founder bottleneck.
McKinsey points out that the charismatic, do-it-all leader who got the company off the ground suddenly becomes its ultimate operational bottleneck when the volume of tasks just eclipses their human capacity. Think about that superhero founder who used to code the app, answer the support emails, and literally buy the office snacks.
When the company scales, they suddenly turn into a human traffic jam. An organization simply cannot function, let alone scale, if every single strategic decision requires the founder's signature.
John Hamm's research in the Harvard Business Review breaks down 4 specific traps these founders fall into. First, they get total tunnel vision, staying down in the weeds of technical tasks instead of actually leading. Then there's this intense attachment to the founding team, like keeping your college buddy as CFO even when the finances have grown way out of their depth. They just completely fail to shift from doing the work to managing it, and this whole personality-leadership mismatch creates a massive vacuum of formal structure.
And all of this over-reliance on individual heroes brings us to number 4, the infrastructure deficit. You've probably heard of Dunbar's number, right? It's roughly 150. Once a team grows beyond 150 meaningful relationships, everything fundamentally changes. Human brains literally cannot maintain social connections with everyone past that point. Those informal corridor conversations, they completely break down. The company barbecue where everyone just kind of gets on the same page? Yeah, that stops working entirely. You can't rely on tribal knowledge anymore. You desperately need rigid, documented communication structures.
Because without that systematic communication, the culture fragments incredibly fast. Suddenly, you have 73% of mid-sized businesses paralyzed by data that's just trapped in disparate, totally disconnected systems. Your sales team, your customer success reps, your engineers, they're all operating in completely separate silos. They're looking at different numbers, which makes timely, accurate, and clear strategic decision-making basically impossible.
Upgrading these systems is absolutely crucial as your volume ramps up. If your operational systems, like your CRM or your HR software, fail to handle the load, the business simply can't deliver. Scaling sounds incredibly sexy on paper, but if your back-end infrastructure is fragile, scaling just means breaking promises faster. It means lost customer tickets, catastrophic billing errors, and ultimately a completely ruined reputation.
Okay, so how do we actually fix this mess? That brings us to our final section, number 5, building systems for scale.
You have to fundamentally rewire the business, literally change its DNA. This means a deliberate, aggressive shift from being people-dependent to being process-dependent. You have to create an industrialized machine where if your top performer goes on a 2-week vacation, the entire company doesn't immediately catch fire. That level of clarity in every single role ensures the structure operates flawlessly, whether the founder is even in the building or not.
Doing this requires 3 very deliberate steps. First, you've got to audit your operational bottlenecks. Find out exactly where the traffic jams are. Second, implement clear, accessible standard operating procedures. And look, we're not talking about dusty, unreadable corporate manuals. We mean actual usable structural tools. And third, you have to physically decentralize your leadership so power and decision-making aren't just bottlenecked by one person. McKinsey calls this industrializing the scale-up phase to build structural clarity. This means actually professionalizing customer success rather than just winging it, enabling strategic partnerships, and fundamentally upgrading your data architecture so everyone is finally working from the exact same numbers. And yeah, it might even mean making the absolutely brutal strategic decision to swap out beloved early team members for seasoned executives who actually know how to steer hypergrowth.
As you reflect on all of this, I want you to really lock in on this one incredibly powerful takeaway from the research. Growth gets attention, systems build empires. It is just so true. You cannot brute force your way to scale using sheer willpower and late nights. You have to meticulously engineer it with absolute clarity, a bulletproof strategy, and a rock-solid structural foundation. So I'm going to leave you with this provocative question to ponder. Is your past success actually stalling your future growth? Are the scrappy, informal mindsets that got your business off the ground now the very things suffocating it? Take a really hard look at your structure and your strategy. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer today, and I really hope it gives you the clarity you need to successfully engineer your next big phase of growth.